Earlier this year, I took a trip with some of my extended family to upstate New York. I made the trip there and back by Amtrak on the Lakeshore Limited, which was a great experience, but not actually the focus of this video. As it turned out, on the way back, the way the logistics of the whole thing worked out, my family ended up needing to drop me off at the Amtrak station in Rochester around 11:30 in the morning on the last day we were there, so that they could get on the road to get to their next stop. Now, the Lakeshore Limited back towards Chicago is scheduled to arrive in Rochester just before midnight, so this gave me more than 12 hours to spend by myself in Rochester. Of course, when I find myself with a lot of time somewhere, I like to explore the local transit system. So I thought I might do a review of the Regional Transit Service, or RTS, in Rochester. But I also thought it could be interesting to make a video about just how I spend a long day in a city with no car and no hotel, such as I did on this trip. So, this video is kind of both of those ideas in one. This is how I spent a 12-plus hour layover in Rochester, and my review of the RTS. Now, as you've probably noticed and will continue to notice, this video suffers from the same issue I had last time I tried to make a video about a city outside of Chicago. I had been traveling for more than a week, and my iPhone, already frequently low on storage, was nearly full from everything I had been capturing earlier in the trip. So the amount of video I was able to capture in Rochester was fairly limited. So you will likely see me dip into my library of video footage of other cities in order to cover all the time while I'm talking. Also, the way that I make these videos means that I'm actually writing this script well before I actually sit down to do the editing and bring the video clips in, so I'm not exactly sure how it will work with matching what's on the screen with matching what I'm saying. We'll just see how it goes. Let's begin. So, as I said, my family dropped me off at Rochester's Louis M. Slaughter Station around 11:30 in the morning. Because of how the logistics of our family trip had worked out, I had my suitcase, backpack, and 2 tote bags in tow with me. Since space and weight are not anywhere near as much of a concern for a train as they are on an airplane, Amtrak has a very generous luggage policy. Between major cities on long-distance routes, they offer checked baggage service and allow each passenger 2 checked bags, free of charge, 2 carry-on bags, and 1 personal item, which can be stored at the passenger's feet. Obviously, having all of the luggage items with me that I described a moment ago, I did not want to haul all of those around Rochester with me. Even though my train wasn't scheduled to depart for more than 12 hours, after some initial confusion, wondering why I was there so early, the staff were happy to check in my suitcase right then. I had to present my ticket, and then I received a claim check to get my bag back when I arrived in Chicago. At many staff stations, including the one at Rochester, Amtrak also provides a luggage storage service called Parcel Check, and they'll hold a bag for the reasonable fee of $10 per bag. Even better, the friendly station attendant was happy to count my 2 tote bags as 1 item. Having now shed all of my luggage except for my backpack, which contained the essentials for the day, I was now free to enjoy the city. Before setting out, though, I stopped to admire the Amtrak station in Rochester, which provides a nice waiting area and station services. The building is also just an attractive one and a pleasant place to be, which sadly can't be said for many other Amtrak stations around the country. Anyway, I had about 12 and a half hours left in my stay, and the first task was going to be to figure out where I wanted to go. It was a Sunday, and my train wasn't scheduled to get me into Chicago until midway through the workday on Monday. Of course, while I've worked from the train before, since I had some spare time and my company does allow me the flexibility to do so, I figured getting some work done that afternoon would be best. In my experience, public libraries often offer a great space to get work done. There are a number of libraries in the greater Rochester area, but the only one that I could find that was open on Sundays was the Brighton Public Library. It's just under an hour from the Amtrak station by public transit, and it's only open from noon to 4 p.m. on Sundays. So, I shouldered my backpack and set out. It was now time to begin my experience with the RTS. The RTS system is a hub-and-spoke bus network centered in downtown Rochester. Now, while my overall experience with the RTS was positive, I'll begin with a couple of the downsides that I noticed on my trip there. The first of these is that the downtown transit hub is located only a little less than half a mile from the Amtrak station. The transit center was only built in 2012, so finding a way to site it adjacent to the Amtrak station would have been a huge plus, especially with the Amtrak station itself having been rebuilt beginning in 2014, just 2 years later. With the two development projects occurring so close to each other, it seems like it could have been a good opportunity to find a way to site the two facilities together. It seems, however, that connectivity between the two services was not a top consideration. Although it is worth noting that both the local transit center and the Amtrak station were both located relatively close to downtown Rochester proper, which once again is not something that can be said for every city. Anyway, my plan was to take a quick ride on the number 2 bus into the transit center, where I could transfer to the bus that would then take me to Brighton. Unfortunately, I found myself walking up to the bus stop just in time to see my bus pulling away. And here was my second and biggest issue with the RTS: the frequency of service. The next bus would not arrive for another half hour. Now, there's a good way and a bad way to look at this. On the plus side, service does still run to most of the city on a Sunday afternoon, and it is every 30 minutes, and it seems fairly consistent. Having frequent transit is very important, but if it's unreliable or it doesn't go where you need it to, it's not very useful. There are plenty of cities out there, some of which I've been to, where transit services just cut back by an insane amount on weekends, or even where it only runs Monday through Friday. So having this extensive of service available on a Sunday is still an improvement over many cities. There are also plenty of cities where one bus every hour is sadly the norm. So again, 30 minutes could be worse. With all of that said, 30 minutes is still a really, really long time to wait for a transit vehicle to arrive. And it's certainly not going to do any favors towards making the case that transit can be a viable way to get around the city when one has other options to consider as well. Personally, I didn't want to wait that long for my bus, especially when the transit center was so close. So instead, I opted to take the walk, which was about 10 minutes. The walk was fine. It wasn't particularly pleasant, as it passed over this freeway and was along a major road the entire way, but there was a decent sidewalk the whole way. I never felt unsafe as a result of traffic, although there were a few, shall we say, unpleasant characters hanging around on the street. However, soon enough, I arrived at the transit center. It was at the transit center, however, that my opinions of RTS began to switch back to positive. The building is a fairly pleasant environment. It's clean, it provides an out-of-the-elements waiting area for buses, there are station facilities, and there are staff present who can assist with issues, as well as provide a sense of security. Something which I can't even say for staffed rapid transit stations in other cities. Admittedly, I didn't have the most straightforward time trying to use the restroom facilities at the station. I got there right as they were closing this restroom, presumably for cleaning. There was a sign directing me to additional restrooms, which brought me around to the other side of the station where there were staff-only restrooms? I'm not really sure what was going on here. Fortunately, I didn't need the restroom too urgently, and I came around here to find these ticket machines. This gives me a good opportunity to discuss payment methods and fares on RTS. There are a number of ways to pay for your ride, although not all of these were immediately clear from reading their website. Firstly, you can, of course, pay in cash at the fare box on the bus. As you may imagine, you can also purchase a paper ticket from the machine at the transit center, and it will be one of these tickets that looks kind of like a receipt, but you can scan this at the reader adjacent to the fare box and ride that way. As has been more common in recent years, these readers are also capable of reading contactless credit and debit cards in both physical form as well as in a digital wallet app on a smartphone. A final option is to pay as you go or purchase a pass on an RTS Go online account. Once you set up your online account, you can either order a reloadable smart card in the mail, or you can connect your account to the Transit app. The Transit app, if you're not familiar with it, is a mobile app that seeks to serve as an interface for all major transit systems around the world. In cities like Chicago, where the transit agency has already developed its own mobile app, the Transit app simply supplements the existing one. Meanwhile, many other systems, such as the ones in St. Louis and here in Rochester, have opted to have transit also be their primary interface for next vehicle arrival information and fares. If you set up your RTS Go account through the Transit app, you can add funds and the app will generate a QR code on your phone's screen, which you can scan to pay for your ride. The fare for a single ride is just $1. From what I can tell, RTS does not offer free transfers, but if you're paying as you go on your RTS Go account, fares are capped at $3 per day, after which you'll pay nothing. A day pass is also, not coincidentally, $3 to purchase, meaning that if you pay as you go in your RTS account, you'll never pay for more than the cost of a one-day pass, and you'll never have to worry about whether or not purchasing the pass is going to be worth it. Alas, I did not have all of this information prior to my trip. Not confident enough in my plans to make it worth ordering an RTS Go card in the mail ahead of time, I chose to pay through the Transit app and do it right when I got there. Since you can't purchase passes in the app, this meant I would have needed to pay as I went. Figuring I would take at least 2 rides, I loaded $2 onto my account just before I arrived in Rochester. When I came across these ticket machines, I thought I'd just grab a day pass just in case, since I was not yet aware of the fare cap. Since I used my day pass for all my rides, the $2 in my RTS Go account went unused. So I ended up paying a total of $5 for my day when I could have only paid $3. So hopefully, this video can help others to avoid this same mistake. So this is Ford from the future, coming in to make a few additional comments. I started out this section of the video where I talked about fares, saying that I looked at the website and not all of the options I talked about were very obvious from looking at it. And I think one of those options that I thought at the time was not shown on the website that was available was the ability to pay with contactless payment using your credit card or your Apple Wallet or something like that. And I didn't see that option on the website at the time, but as I was going through the process of writing the script for this video and going through making the recording, I was going back and looking at the RTS website several times, and I discovered this bulletin that payment system just went into effect in October, and this trip was before October. So even though I saw readers that were capable of taking contactless payment, it looks like perhaps that payment option wouldn't have been available to me at the time, which of course that is a very convenient option for someone who's just stopping in to town for one day, the way that I was. So that is now shown on the website, that option is available to you. So really the only shortcoming of what is on the website, which I probably could have found if I just looked a little more carefully, was the fare cap, the $3 fare cap. That was the main thing that I really missed on the website, and it could have saved me just a couple bucks. It's only $2. I don't care too much, but that's part of what I wanted to say in this video. Make sure you're aware of all the different ways that you can pay, because they do offer a lot of great ways to pay, and do be aware of that $3 fare cap. It can make it really easy. You don't have to worry about buying a pass or anything like that. Anyway, having purchased my day pass, I then located the route I needed on the departure board and walked to the gate number indicated. Somewhat confusingly, there doesn't seem to be an effort to coordinate the routes and gate numbers, so you have a numbered bus and a numbered gate. You kind of gotta keep track of both of those numbers. Soon, my bus had arrived, and I could head out the door and actually board the bus itself. The route I was riding was the number 11 Monroe bus, which it seems also went by the name of 11L Monroe Long Line. Outside the downtown area, this route primarily serves Monroe Street. The bus itself was fairly unremarkable. Not too dissimilar from buses here in Chicago. It was relatively clean and a decent ride. After about 17 minutes on board, I had arrived at my stop, 1415 Monroe. From this stop, alongside a busy city road, I turned off onto a street in a residential neighborhood, which would take me to the library. Google Maps shows that this walk takes about 12 minutes, although I think I made it a little bit faster than that. The library, of course, fronts onto a main road, but this neighborhood street brought me in through the back of the library property, where some construction was being performed around the local playground. While this construction site was covering the sidewalk that connected into the library, I was pleasantly surprised to find that this temporary sidewalk had been set up around the construction site. I'd actually never seen such a thing before and was rather fascinated by it. It was such a welcome change from what I am unfortunately all too familiar with in Chicago, where pedestrian access simply gets overlooked when construction gets in the way. And I was also very happy to finally be able to make it to my destination. I arrived at the Brighton Public Library around 12:30. The library turned out to be quite a pleasant place. I was able to get 3 solid hours of work done, make that restroom visit that I didn't get a chance to at the transit center, and refill my water bottle. So, there's my little commercial for the important role that public libraries play in society. I was very thankful that that space was available to the general public. Around 3:30 in the afternoon, the battery for my work laptop died. And the power supply was in my checked bag. Of course. So, I wasn't going to get any more work done for my day job, but the library's getting ready to close soon anyway. Time to go out and get more work done for this video. The weather had changed drastically while I was in the library, and it was now cold and a little bit rainy. Unfortunately, since it was still the middle of summer, I had only packed one jacket for my trip, and it was, you guessed it, in my checked bag. So there's my big lesson learned from this trip. Make sure you think about what you're leaving in your checked bag. I made my way back through the neighborhood to Monroe Street and found that one of the nearby bus stops had a shelter, which was very welcome as I could wait for my bus out of the rain. It was about an 11-minute wait for my bus, which, of course, wasn't great, but it wasn't terrible either. I was happy to have the shelter. My bus arrived soon enough, and I was on my way back into town. The ride back into Rochester felt very quick, and soon enough, I was stepping off back at the RTS Transit Center. I walked across the transit center and made a smooth, almost instantaneous connection onto route number 3, the Joseph Avenue bus, and rode it one stop back to Joseph and Central, just outside of the Amtrak station. In my early years of living in Chicago and taking an interest in the CTA, I found myself taking a lot of trips at night and on weekends with long waits in between trains. Many hours over the course of a few years spent at Adams and Wabash Station waiting for the Brown Line to arrive. At the time, the idea of having a YouTube channel seemed like some distant, crazy idea that I never really expected to happen. But I discovered that I did rather enjoy taking videos of the trains. It was a nice way to pass the time while I waited for mine to arrive. So I coined some words of advice for myself. Treat every long wait for a transit vehicle as an unexpected filming opportunity. I still tried to hold myself to this advice, and I certainly did so in Rochester. Arriving back at the Amtrak station around 5 p.m., it was still some 7 hours before my train would arrive. But there were a few other trains passing through. Unfortunately, one of the few things that I do not like about Rochester's Amtrak station is the fact that it's not a great place for watching trains. You're not allowed onto the platform unless you're holding a ticket for a train that is about to arrive, and they have all these fences that are around the station that make it difficult to get within view of the trains if you're not on the platform. Nonetheless, with spirits undampened, it was time to head off and find some dinner. Once again, I had just missed the bus that would take me into the transit center, so I opted to make the walk instead of waiting another half hour for the next one. When I arrived, I found the number 22 bus, which reminded me of a bus I frequently ride in Chicago. And this one, it turned out, was actually in the gate that matched its route number. Probably just a coincidence, but it was kind of neat. Just a 10-minute ride later, and I was just a block away from the nearest Wendy's. Yeah, I know, I'm spending one day in a city and I decide to go to a chain fast food joint that's all across the country, but I was on a budget. And despite all that inflation that we're all complaining about, I managed to get a very sizable dinner for just over $10. Well, some might argue with my definition of dinner, but I was well filled and ready to go for the rest of the day. As I left, the bus to take me back downtown was arriving momentarily, so I had to hustle a bit to make it. Another quick ride, and I was back at the transit center. It was a fairly quick connection back to the number 2 bus, and then I was back at the Amtrak station. So by this time, I had about 4 hours left until my train. It was a long wait, but a much more reasonable amount of time to spend at the station. This gave me some time to reflect on my experience. On the whole, I quite enjoyed it. Rochester has a nice train station. The RTS overall I found to be pretty good. The Brighton library was nice. I got a good amount of work done, and all told, at the end of the day, between paying for the bus, paying for luggage storage, and buying dinner, I only spent $25.45 for my entire day. My only regrets were in lack of preparation. My power supply being in my checked bag, and my lack of preparation for the cold weather. The other issue, of course, was my phone storage issue that I mentioned at the beginning of the video, and that's why you're looking at whatever video's on screen now instead of more of the footage from my trip. Anyway, despite the ups and downs of the trips, I was very happy as the time grew closer. I took my receipt to the baggage desk, got my stored bags back, and followed the station staff out to the platform. As the train approached, I was happy that soon I would both be on a train and also finally on my way home. Thanks for joining me on this unusual trip to Rochester. I'll see you next time.